it's always a hard question. And like, I also don't know an answer to that because it's so confusing for me. But do you think self-custody becomes mainstream, or is it always a niche thing for paranoid crypto anarchists?
This is a good question. The idea of self-custody is the one of the tenets of Bitcoin that I think most internal Bitcoiners hope. It's certainly what makes you the most self-sovereign, right? But ultimately, I do think models where there is some type of shared custody are going to be more common in the future as we build out. There are some practical limits, for example, to the number of actual UTXOs that can exist. Like if we have 8 billion people all trying to share 21 million Bitcoin, I mean, that math, not everyone is going to get one Bitcoin, right? Is everyone going to be able to have a UTXO? Well, you can do some math on that. There's a you can have approximately what, a thousand, a little over 1,000 transactions in one Bitcoin block. There's 10 Bitcoin blocks. Sorry, one Bitcoin block every 10 minutes. So scarcity of block space actually does make it kind of difficult for everyone to be able to move a UTXO over the course of their lifetime. Even I don't have the math on this right at hand, but yeah, it's basically not quite possible for everyone to take pure self custody where one person owns the UTXO. It might be incredibly rare, actually, in human terms, that people take that you actually do something directly on the base layer of Bitcoin. Now, okay, holding non-custodial Lightning, that's maybe slightly more possible, but what does that mean? Like that you have access to this Lightning wallet, and somehow there are keys that you have access to. Maybe it anchors to the Liquid network or to Arc. A lot of this also depends on what you mean by self-custody. Do you mean that, yeah, you hold specifically Bitcoin in a hardware wallet or something like this, or do you mean one of these other layers, one of these other technologies? There's covenants, there's Fedimint, Cashew with eCash protocols that are meant to solve some of these things. That these anchor down to Lightning, these anchor down to the base layer eventually. Yeah, so to answer your question directly, no, I don't think most people are going to take self-custody if you mean that most people are going to have a UTXO. We're going to hit the people that are technically capable enough and have the wealth to be able to use the base chain, but we're not there yet. Right now, anyone coming onto Bitcoin can absolutely fully do the self-sovereignty stack, take self-custody, have a UTXO or 5 or 20, and then in some years when it becomes a little harder to get into blocks and things like this because of adoption, then maybe it looks like you have some kind of Lightning, or maybe you share custody with someone else. Maybe that's through covenants, maybe that's through some other solution. Eventually I do foresee a world where there are some third parties involved to some extent. I mean, there are now exchanges, custodial wallet providers, things like this, but it's all a part of scaling Bitcoin to 8 billion plus people. And ultimately, I believe that if you are owed some number of sats, if you're owed 100,000, a million sats, something like this, from a custodian or an exchange or something like this, it's still better than holding that equivalent in some kind of fiat currency. You're just taking some risk, and you're trusting that the third party is going to give you those funds if you ask for them, and be capable of giving you those funds. But yeah, Bitcoin adoption is good, and adopting Bitcoin in ways that are accessible to people is good, even if it's not perfect self-sovereign, self-custody right off the bat.
I love that answer. Really, really cool. Because it shows like also how amazing it is that we now can send, I literally did it in the morning, a Bitcoin transaction for like 20 or 30 cents. Like it was like almost nothing, and it went through in like 40, 50 minutes. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I was like, this will be so rare in like 30 years. And people like, wait, you said like that amount of sats just over the network for like 30 cents. This will, I think Bob Burnett puts it nicely. He said like, we are used to rolling in the Rolls Royce on the main chain. That will be something luxurious and something very rare in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, whenever we have a little bit more activity on the base chain. I want to dive into now we covered for a quite long time actually, the individual level. Let's talk a little bit about the network and Bitcoin level. If you are an individual, what can you do to protect the network? Like, what is something that every Bitcoiner can do to make sure not only his stack but also Bitcoin itself is a little bit stronger?
Sure. Well, the easiest thing you can do and the first thing you can do is to run your own node. And this is another one of those things that Bitcoiners often say that, okay, if you're going to hold Bitcoin, you need to run a node. There's even Luke Dasher, I think, basically says that you're not really owning Bitcoin if you're not running your own node. I don't go that far. It's definitely great to run a node, but the hardware isn't free. Running a Bitcoin node off of a Raspberry Pi is still possible, but the technology is getting more and more expensive. We're in the middle of a crisis in the price of RAM and storage and things like this. So once you've started to save in Bitcoin and build a stack or 3 or whatever it is, I recommend running your own full node and figuring out how to do that. And there's plenty of great services that offer operating systems that make it a lot easier. It's certainly different than the really early days when you would just run Bitcoin. Well, it wasn't even called Bitcoin Core, the Bitcoin software on your computer. But there's Start9, there's Umbrel, there's plenty of others. And the thing is here is that running your own node teaches you a lot of things. It teaches you about the initial block synchronization and how that works. It teaches you about all of the other services that are on top of Bitcoin. Like if you run an Electrum server, you need a full node to run the Electrum server, and from there you can run your own mempool instance. So all of these things are educational tools that give you more and more information and view of the network. And ultimately, the decentralization of the network depends on node runners, and it depends on everyone enforcing the consensus rules of the network. And so run your own node. That's probably the first step. Now, running your own node does come with some, say, risks is the right term, definitely, but more like there are security measures to be aware of if you run a node. Like for example, the communication on a Bitcoin node, if you don't protect it with something like Tor, it's all out in the open, or it used to be all out in the open. Nowadays the communication of Bitcoin by default is encrypted, which is a good thing. It means that your internet service provider can't see that everything that you're doing with the Bitcoin network. But there are other types of attacks that can affect nodes. The main point that I make in defending Bitcoin about node running is that there are great people doing fantastic work at Bitcoin Core, mostly working on making it better and easier and more secure to run a Bitcoin node. For example, there's folks working on making the initial block synchronization much faster, optimizing the UTXO set, things like this. There are consistently in the change logs for new Bitcoin Core versions, there's a list of the security features that or bugs that they've fixed and patched. So there's constantly work going on to make running a node easier, safer, more secure, more accessible. And so if you're saving a significant amount of money in Bitcoin, running a node is the first thing that I can recommend.
Yeah, and I think so few do it. I think a few actually take their own keys, and I think nobody that like the first thing is keeping your own keys, like self-custodying your own Bitcoin. If you don't do that, you probably don't run your own node. I would assume. Maybe there are some people out there that trust an exchange but still run their own node. I don't think so, but maybe. But then like even fewer of the people that actually keep their own keys like are also running their own node. And I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. It's also an additional responsibility to be aware of. It's I think you said in the beginning, we are the security team, which I absolutely love. But with being the security team, there's also responsibilities that come with that power. That you also have to have the knowledge and all of that. It can look confusing, even if you look at like the last 40 minutes that you said, like, oh, you have to do this, that, and like, oh wow, like 40 minutes of content and already like feels quite like overwhelming. Just go with an exchange. Like I sometimes feel like that. We I don't know, maybe it's just because we're early, because if you think about I talk about that car example a lot because I'm currently obsessed with it. But the car, when it came out in 86, nobody really used it the first like 10, 15 years because there were no paved roads, there was no gas station, there were like no mechanics, the supply chain was like horrible. So like it needed 15 years to actually get built out. And then and the first car was also super slow and didn't have a lot of range, but like also no roof and like a lot of other problems. But the ecosystem was, I think, the bigger problem. And so then we come to this famous picture of New York Easter morning in 1900, where on the one side there is a couple of like a lot of horses in like one car, and the other one is 13 years later, completely different, which is exactly 15 years after the car actually got on the market, which I think we might be living through also in Bitcoin, where we just need the ecosystem, the apps, the services, all the things around it to make all those things easier, no matter where on the security level you get where what I'm saying.
I do, absolutely, and the analogy is a good one. And I mean, I think another way to use the car, and I'm borrowing from Max again here. I was just editing the podcast he did with Knut's funnel. I'm still editing Knut's podcast. The another car analogy is that nobody, a tiny subset of people knows exactly how a car works, but we all drive them, right? How many people know exactly how your phone operating system works, or your computer works? Could you make it from scratch? What would happen if you tried to build a computer from scratch, right? You can't. The thing with it is that there are so many complexities, and no one can be an expert in absolutely every aspect, right? So the thing is, peeling away layers and building up one piece of technology that you kind of master to a certain extent. Like you don't know the operations going on in your hardware wallet, for example. Most people don't. There are some developers who do, but that's a small number of people. You do have to trust eventually that this stuff is going to work. And when we're talking about adoption, that the vast majority of the people buying those cars also didn't know exactly how to do it, and you needed as you say, this ecosystem to grow up around it. And so there are people doing fantastic work building, making everything easier, faster, cheaper to get into Bitcoin and more accessible. And then the thing is, the closer you get to the base layer, and the closer you get to taking full self-sovereignty, full self-custody, running a node, mining is something we haven't even talked about yet. All of this stuff, it adds one layer of complexity and one more thing that you have to think about. But if you do have the majority, or even virtually all of your wealth in Bitcoin, and this is the way you're planning on saving, and this is the way that you're hoping that your value stays over time, beats inflation, and eventually, hopefully, unlocks the potential for a lot of good in the world. Well, then Bitcoin is important to you, and you might want to take more and more steps and learn about something. Learn about new things over time. And in the car analogy, maybe you decide to poke under the hood and learn a little bit about your car if you are really using it all the time for your job or something like this. So it's just going deeper in steps. I don't recommend doing everything at once, but yeah, the things you should do. Defending Bitcoin is all about what. It's not going into deep technical level about how, but it's what. It's like a roadmap or a guide about, here are the things that you could consider doing, and then figuring out exactly how to do that. There's some suggestions, places that you can start, but yeah, baby steps, not all at once.
Yeah, I guess sticking with the car analogy for a second here, if you operate a car, you should know how you should treat it. Like if you have a gas car, like short distances, driving all the time, probably breaks the like, not probably, but is damaging the engine at some point. If you have a battery car like an EV, you should know how to charge it and like what are the limits on that. Like you should kind of like know how to operate it without damaging it massively. And I kind of like the analogy because you are trusting the car with your life. I mean, it's unlikely that you step in a car and it's like in such bad shape that it just falls out and like you outside of an accident you lose your life. But in a certain point, like you are trusting this device that you're driving 100 kilometer per hour. I mean, maybe 200 kilometer per hour if you are going on a German autobahn. That everything fits and everything is good. And so with Bitcoin also, there has to be some trust, like without us examining everything in detail, because most people will never do that. There are some cybersecurity experts that like dig deeper and like poke holes at Bitcoin and try to drive it to maximum. But I don't know. Most people probably need a rough understanding what they should do and best practices, and not needing to know exactly how to disassemble and reassemble an engine. They just need to know where to change the oil, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And so the analogy there continuing is that learning how to drive a car, that might be learning how to run a hardware wallet for the first time, something like this. And you just build further and further. And so yeah, as you say, we've kind of talked about the personal side quite a bit. And going a little bit further from the node level here, the next step is to get involved with mining, or to understand the situation with mining. And this is where the environment gets a little bit more complicated here. This is a decentralized system, right? And a decentralized system with a lot of nodes in the network, and a lot of complicated moving parts. The nodes are the things that are enforcing the consensus rules, but the miners are the ones that are finding the new blocks. And there's so much hash rate going into the Bitcoin network at every moment, right? I don't have any of my Bitcoin miners running because they're very warm and they heat my house. I've got a Ofen 2 from 21 Energy that I'm very happy with. But um, getting involved with mining and understanding the situation with mining is kind of the next step. And that's where things start to get just a little bit more complicated. Is that mining is what secures the Bitcoin network from a proper sense. It's what prevents someone from double spending, or from trying to send Bitcoin to one person but then secretly sending it to another. Bitcoin mining can censor transactions if they want to. Like a large miner can choose to just not include your transactions if they want. There was this OFAC list going around. It still exists. Currently, there aren't any miners that I'm aware of that are fully enforcing these proposed OFAC rules. But yeah, the key properties of Bitcoin are upheld by mining. And the reality is, right now, there's one miner foundry that has over 30% of the hash power, and on any given day maybe they even have 40 or 45% of the blocks. It's getting very, very close to the point where they have more than 51% of the hash power, which if you followed along, that a 51% attack is when someone gets 51% control of this mining network, and then they're able to do all kinds of things. They could reorganize blocks, they could include only the transactions they want. There's some concern there. And so getting involved with mining and understanding what's going on there would be the next step that I would encourage someone to take. So I don't know where this fits in the car analogy exactly, but just another next level thing to get into and be aware of.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.